Hello again, and welcome to Elul Podcast number 2. Second in our series of 4 podcasts for the month of Elul, this month of preparation for Yamim Noraim, the days of awe, Rosh Hashanah, and Yom Kippur. I want to explore an idea with you over these next few minutes. An idea that's wrapped up in a particular kind of spiritual or contemplative practice called quietude. The Hebrew for quietude comes from the word sheket, which means quiet. In Hebrew, it's hashkata, how to make for quiet, how to build quiet, how to create quiet. The great Eric Carle, lost to us in this past year, has a wonderful book called The Very Quiet Cricket. I want to share a few of its beautiful pages with you. The Very Quiet Cricket. One warm day, from a tiny egg, a little cricket was born. "Welcome," chirped a big cricket, rubbing his wings together. The little cricket wanted to answer, so he rubbed his wings together. But nothing happened. Not a sound. "Good morning," whizzed a locust, spinning through the air. The little cricket wanted to answer, so he rubbed his wings together, but nothing happened. Not a sound. "Hello," whispered a praying mantis, scraping its huge front legs together. The little cricket wanted to answer, so he rubbed his wings together. But nothing happened, not a sound. "Good day," crunched a worm, munching its way out of an apple. The little cricket wanted to answer, so he rubbed his wings together. But nothing happened, not a sound. "Hi," bubbled a spittle bug, slurping in a sea of froth. The little cricket wanted to answer, so he rubbed his wings together. But nothing happened, not a sound. "Good afternoon," screeched a cicada, clinging to a branch of a tree. The little cricket wanted to answer, so he rubbed his wings together, but nothing happened. Not a sound. "How are you?" hummed a bumblebee, flying from flower to flower. The little cricket wanted to answer, so he rubbed his wings together, but nothing happened. Not a sound. "Good evening," whirred a dragonfly gliding above the water. The little cricket wanted to answer, so he rubbed his wings together. But nothing happened, not a sound. "Good night," buzzed the mosquitoes, dancing among the stars. The little cricket wanted to answer, so he rubbed his wings together, but nothing happened, not a sound. A Luna moth sailed quietly through the night, and the cricket enjoyed the stillness. As the Luna moth disappeared silently into the distance, the cricket saw another cricket. She, too, was a very quiet cricket. And then he rubbed his wings together one more time. And this time, he chirped the most beautiful sound that she had ever heard. The very quiet cricket is able to express himself only in that moment of stillness. How do we express ourselves in a moment of stillness? How do we get to that moment of stillness in the first place? Rav Nachman of Bratslav, the great Hasidic master of the late 18th and early 19th century, describes a piece of spiritual practice that is meant to bring us to that moment of stillness. He begins by writing of becoming reabsorbed into one's spiritual roots, one's shorashim, which for him means becoming part of God's unity. And the only way to get there is by means of what he calls self-annihilation. Bitul, sheyibatel atzmo legamre. And the only way to achieve that is with solitude. It's only in solitary talk with God that we can abolish all of our lust and evil traits to the point that we completely negate our material existence and are able to be reabsorbed in our own roots. Rav Nachman tells us that the best time for that kind of solitude is at night. At night, when the world is free of worldly occupations. Daytime, you see, is distracting, it's confusing, it prevents us from becoming attached and reunited with God. And even if you're not personally occupied with material things, it's hard to achieve bitul, self-nullification, when the rest of the world is so busy pursuing this worldly vanities. And so he counsels that solitude should take place someplace secluded, outside of town, where there's nobody milling around. A place where there's usually traffic during the day, not conducive to solitude, to reabsorption in God, even if there's no one around at the moment. So the requirements are these: nighttime and a lonely road or place. That's what's needed. During these solitary sessions, Rav Nachman continues, take the opportunity to empty your head and mind of all worldly interests, negating everything until you truly attain bitul. In your loneliness, and the Hebrew word for loneliness in Nachman's vocabulary is hitbodedut. In your loneliness at night in a secluded place, you can begin by saying prayers, by conversing frequently with God. Elsewhere, he tells us that you should converse frequently with God in your own regular, everyday language. And bit by bit, you will succeed in abolishing one or another lust or bad habit. Keep it up, Nachman counsels, until another of your passions and evil traits is voided, and keep at it in the same way for an even longer time, until you've rid yourself of all of them, until, in his words, there is nothing left of you. Only then does your soul rejoin its roots. And its roots, the roots of all of us, are in God, the one whose existence is necessary. And when that happens, all the world is included in your soul, because your soul is now reabsorbed in its divine root, whose existence is necessary for everything depends on God. So quiet and aloneness, if practiced over and over again, can lead us to be tooled to pushing out all that ego stuff that is so frequently part of who we are and part of our experience, enabling us to be completely absorbed in God, enabling us to be truly still. Over the course of this past year, I've had the opportunity to learn week by week a teaching from a most interesting 20th century Hasidic master, a rabbi named Kalonymus Kalman Shapira, who was also known as the Piazetzner Rebbe. Originally from a small town outside of Warsaw, Piazetzna, which eventually became absorbed into the city itself by Rabbi Shapira's time. Piazetzna was essentially a neighborhood of Warsaw. And he opened up a yeshiva, quite an interesting yeshiva, in Warsaw in the 20s. And we have a number of his lessons, usually built around the weekly Torah portion, from those years. One of those lessons is about the practice that he calls hashkata, of quieting, how one gets there, how one goes about it. Now, my teacher through this year has been also a quite remarkable early 21st century rabbi named Yael Sadoff. And I want to share with you both some of the Piazetzner's words and Rabbi Sadoff's descriptions and explanations. And as I think you'll hear, her playing out of his ideas is really most beautiful and remarkable. The Piazetzner starts with what he calls concrete advice about how to quiet your thoughts. A person should begin by observing her thoughts for a little while, over the course of some moments. In other words, to ask yourself, what is it that I'm thinking? Slowly, one will then feel that her head is emptying out and her thoughts are ceasing from their typical involvement. So the first step in quieting the mind, writes Rabbi Sadoff, is that of observing the content of thought. For many of us, she adds, this may be a difficult place to start. Our normal experience is merged with thought, and so we'll find it difficult not to get swept up in the content of each and every thought as it arises. It's one of the reasons why meditators focus on just the breath and noting the phenomenon of thought generally. As a thought arises, we say to ourselves, thought, and then return to the breath. That process over and over again will slow the mind's activity. It will prevent the thoughts from propagating via associative discursive activity. After stabilizing the mind in this way, we can then observe the content of each thought without losing our meta awareness. The Piasetzner then marks off a next step in this process of hashkata, of quieting, which is to recite a mantra. He has one in mind, Adonai Elohim Emet. God is truly God. This anchors the vacated mind at that point in the process to one holy thought, rather than any other slew of mundane thoughts. Rabbi Sadov explains that rather than being aware of something, we simply become awareness itself. And in this state, at least momentarily, we're no longer identified with our independent ego selves. Which leads the Piasetzner to the next step, which is turning toward God for help with the manifestation of a virtue that we need in order to progress spiritually. Here are his words. Then, after that, one can request to have one's spiritual needs met. Some character trait that she needs to repair, such as the strengthening of her faith, or love, or awe. So that's the process. Hashkata, quieting and quieting one's mind. A bit later in her commentary, Rabbi Sadov brings forward the words and the thought of a contemporary Hindu teacher, a sage named Ramana Maharshi, who actually cites the Psalms in his discussion of a state that he describes as wakeful sleep. The words from the Psalms are these: "Be still and know that I am God." Here's Ramana's explanation. Stillness is the aim of the seeker. Even a single effort to still at least a single thought, even for a flash, goes a long way to reach the state of quiescence. Effort is required, and it is possible in the waking state only. There is the effort here. There is awareness also. The thoughts are stilled, so there is the peace of sleep gained. That's the state of the jnani. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Someone who knows the true self. It's neither sleep nor waking, but intermediate between the two. There is the awareness of the waking state, along with the stillness of sleep. The name for it in Sanskrit is Jagrat Sushupti. Call it wakeful sleep, or sleeping wakefulness, or sleepless waking, or wakeless sleep. You get the point? It's not the same as sleep or waking separately. It's the two in combination. Beyond wakefulness, beyond sleep. It is the state of perfect awareness and of perfect stillness combined. And it's the interval between two successive thoughts, the source from which thoughts spring. In other words, he concludes, thoughts have their origin in the stillness of sleep. The thoughts make all the difference between the stillness of sleep and the turmoil of waking. And Rabbi Sadov adds to that beautifully that it is this liminal space between sleep and wakefulness where we can come to understand what the Piasetzner is really referring to. And for her, the key prayer moment is the moment when, at the beginning of the morning service, one says the words, Moda ani lefanecha, Modeh ani lefanecha. I acknowledge you directly, the one who rules over everything, who is life and existence, which, according to tradition, one is meant to recite the second one wakes up. In that moment of regained consciousness, we direct our awareness to the fundamental ground of existence that precedes all thought. The tradition is to say those words even before you open your eyes. And in so doing, to merge with and extend the state of egolessness prior to our discrete self-awareness taking hold. That's quieting. That's hashkata. The Piasetzner concluded his teaching with these words. The whole point is to nullify the ego. When one is asleep, it is impossible for oneself to desire anything. You're asleep. So the main point is to arrive at this state while awake. Something we can manage to do with practice, even in the middle of the day, even in the midst of our busy lives. As we continue to make our way into this month of Elul, my prayer is that each of us can find those moments of stillness, that same moment that the very quiet cricket encountered, and in that moment, to be able to rub our wings together and to make a beautiful sound, a sound that will hear ourselves and that also will be heard by God. Wishing you a continued meaningful Elul, and thank you so much for spending these minutes with me. Enjoy.